American dependence on Middle Eastern oil. Relations between the Saudi and U.S. governments have been strong for the most part. Some question the relationship after September 11th in 2001 when Osama bin Laden and several other Saudis were involved in the attacks of 9/11. Many Saudis mistrust the U.S. because of their support of Israel and the bombing of Iraq. Sending armed troops to the birthplace of Islam is upsetting to many Saudis and Muslims around the world. So here we see a picture of some of the hijackers, and they were from Saudi Arabia and from 9/11. And then we also have a picture of troops going into Saudi Arabia. The U.S. gets more than half of its oil from foreign countries, so the U.S. still finds itself making decisions that will help it keep the oil coming in from all over the world, especially the Middle East. So the U.S. is really tied up in oil. They need oil. We need oil. We always need oil. And so we make friends, even if these friends of ours don't always stay friends of ours. The positive and negative faces of oil. Oil money has created both opportunities and problems for the region. The countries who control a lot of the oil have learned how to manipulate their production and prices to gain power. Manipulate means to change or control to make it good for you. So they're manipulating the production. So sometimes they produce more, sometimes they produce less just to control it. In the 1970s, the price increased and led to an oil shortage. Here you see a picture of that oil shortage. A lot of times it is the smaller countries with smaller populations that have a lot of the oil. They hire people from the larger, poorer countries. These people who come to work in the Gulf countries, like Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, are often treated as second-class citizens. All while the rich people from the small countries then go on vacation at the larger, poorer countries. So poor workers will come in, get treated really badly. The rich people from those rich countries go away and actually go visit the countries that the poor people have come from. Maybe this is a political and an economic thing, right? If we're talking about economics, people getting rich because of people being poor. The future of oil. Oil will continue to be an important regional and global issue. Some question whether one reason for the U.S. trying to stay in Afghanistan and gain influence in the new governments there is to build a pipeline through Afghanistan. This is the proposed pipeline. It's being built right now. Some estimates show that by 2050, Central Asia will provide more than 80% of oil sent to the U.S. This will make the future pipeline very important in keeping the oil flowing. So we see pipeline being built, pipeline map, right? And here you actually see there's a tribal area in Afghanistan that the pipeline is hurting too, just like pipelines in North Dakota have hurt people in the United States here. Water, water, but not everywhere. Another resource of vital importance to the region is water. So look for your water facts here, for your notes for water. I am sure just by looking at Google Earth, you have seen just how important water is to the region. Egypt, Iran, and Turkey are the only countries with an abundant fresh water sources. So if we look here, you can see the orange color and the darker the orange means more scarcity. Remember, scarcity means they don't have much. So scarce means it's rare, scarce. So you'll see in this Middle Eastern and North Africa region, the water is pretty scarce. About 2/3 of the Arab world depend on sources outside their borders for their water supply. So they need to get water from outside of their borders. They need to import water, something we're not very used to in Minnesota. Water wars. The scarcity of water is a major cause of tension between nations in the region. Former UN Secretary General Boutros Ghali said, "The next war in the Middle East will be fought over water. We are already seeing this play out in the Syrian civil war. A lot of people are moving into the big cities moving into the big cities in Syria after their farms had gone away because of the drought. And so they were forced to go to the big cities, and that caused a big issue in Syria and a lot of protests, and then leading to a civil war. The Jordan River, pictured here, provides 75% of Jordan's water and 60% of Israel's. In the early 1960s, Arab nations worked to divert, that means change the direction, the headwaters, the start of the river, of the Jordan away from Israel. The Arab-Israeli Six-Day War of 1967 was to control the Golan Heights. To stop this plan, Israel still doesn't want to give up the Golan Heights up to this day. So we see there's Israeli troops in 1967 during the Six Day War trying to protect their river, but it was actually the Jordan's River. Water wars continued. We see the Euphrates River, which starts in Turkey, provides most of the water for eastern Syria and almost all of Iraq. Turkey plans to build almost 24 hydroelectric power dams for its growing population and factories. These dams would drastically reduce the water available to Syria and Iraq. So here we see a dam being built in Turkey, and this is an example of how the Euphrates River has been dried up in Iraq. Syria, in turn, has dammed part of the Euphrates River under its control, further cutting off the water supply to Iraq. So the Euphrates starts in Turkey, goes to Syria, then goes to Iraq, and Iraq gets the last of it. International complaints and protests are often met with these dams are a domestic home country issue, so they don't think about how it affects the next country that the river goes to. Agricultural resources. The people of the Middle East have adapted, hey, science word, adapted to the environment for thousands of years and have created agriculture here. So even though it's like a desert in a lot of places here, they've adapted and still are able to grow things, especially around the rivers. A water fact, right? Water is needed for agriculture. The history of cotton in Egypt is a good example of how Europeans have exploited, that means take advantage of, exploited the region's agricultural resources also. During the American Civil War, American cotton grew scarce. Scarce again, we see scarce. So, economic fact, during the Civil War, America stopped growing cotton. And Egyptian cotton became increasingly important to England. Here we see Egyptian cotton being loaded up onto ships. More and more farmable land was used to grow cotton instead of food crops, and most of the profits were taken by just a few of the powerful in Egypt. So instead of growing food for everyone, they were growing cotton, and then they weren't even using the money made from the cotton, to give to anyone else. This system of only the top profiting in Egypt remained in place until the Egyptian Revolution of 1952. That was almost 80 years after this happened. Middle Eastern cotton and textile products, however, are still an important export of the region. More and more garments, that means clothing, in American malls, for example, carry a Made in Turkey label. Other important agriculture exports found in supermarkets around the world include citrus, dried dates, figs, and apricots, and olive products. So we see some dried fruit products, citrus, and here's a sweater made in Turkey. All right, now go through. Make sure you've got at least a few notes on each section. You'll need a 4+ for the top ones and 2+ for the bottom ones. Think about water facts, right? So if water facts, you could talk about these water wars and how people have been fighting over the water. Think about your oil facts, pipelines, positive and negative effects, and American dependence on oil. And then for the political part, you can talk about all the revolutions we talked about. The Iranian Revolution of 1979. And the Egyptian Revolution of 1952.